Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Pyromancer here, and welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all having a wonderful day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. And today, I am finally back from my trip to Vegas. So sorry for the week-long hiatus there. Went on a little bit of a vacation. It was pretty crazy, but I have returned, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about what I think could potentially happen at the end of the Eternal Palace raid, which releases tomorrow. Or the day after if you're unfortunately EU. Sorry about that, guys. And I want to talk about Sylvanas, big surprise, and Queen Azshara specifically, because I think that there's basically two different things that could be happening right now. One, which I think is much more likely, and then there is another option as well. Now, one option is this. I'll just get right into it. Sylvanas Windrunner is working for Ny'alotha and against Queen Azshara. That's honestly what I think is happening. Or Sylvanas Windrunner is working with Queen Azshara and also with Ny'alotha, and I don't think that that's what's happening. I think that Blizzard has tried to illustrate in a couple different ways, namely the cinematic where we actually get to see Azshara interacting with Ny'alotha, not just the newest one, but even the original Warbringer, how she treats Ny'alotha, I think is kind of indicative of a couple things. One, I think it illustrates that Queen Azshara is in a position of power, and I think that her pride and tenacity has allowed her to, be established in that situation. It's interesting because Queen Azshara mentions, in her Warbringer cinematic, when her people are swallowed up by the waves and they're consumed by darkness, that this was not the deal that she made, and that is indeed correct as far as we know. It was a deal that was made with the Burning Legion. However, Ny'alotha is willing to offer a deal. Ny'alotha saying, deals. I like deals. With that being said, I think Queen Azshara has kind of asserted herself in this position where she's able to carry out her own will, but at the same time, Ny'alotha is kind of being held by Queen Azshara's will. If Queen Azshara doesn't do what Ny'alotha wants her to do, then I don't think that Ny'alotha can escape. And here's the really scary thing, is that I think Queen Azshara doesn't plan to do what Ny'alotha wants. And I say scary because of the way that I view the old gods in the general story in this game. I don't see it the same way that most people do, clearly. But I don't think Queen Azshara actually plans to let Ny'alotha out. And I think there's a little bit of foreshadowing about this in the most recent cinematic where she talks about, how we've both waited so long. It must... I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it must be troublesome to be locked away, so powerless. And I think that's just like so fucked up, because if it wasn't for Ny'alotha, Queen Azshara would not be living. But Queen Azshara damn well knows that if she wasn't living, that Ny'alotha probably couldn't get out. It's also kind of hilarious that she says things like, we've waited so long, when Ny'alotha was bound for at least 1,000 years before Queen Azshara, as he mentions in the Warbringer, and probably even longer than that. It's as if Queen Azshara equates her waiting with how long Ny'alotha has waited, and that is simply not a fair comparison whatsoever. So here's where Sylvanas comes in. I think that they've done, specifically through imagery, a pretty good job of putting out there this theme that is leading me to believe that Sylvanas is, and don't take this as serving unwillingly, but essentially serving Ny'alotha, working with Ny'alotha to essentially bring about, well, the end of all things. Because in Chronicle it does say that Ny'alotha wanted to bring about the Hour of Twilight, and, well, it also says in Chronicle that the Hour of Twilight was regarded to as the apocalyptic end of all things. Essentially the cataclysm, the apocalypse, the breaking, Ragnarok, even if you will, which is a little bit different if we get into the Norse side of things. But essentially, I think that Sylvanas, and I will continue to say this, at the behest of even the Burning Legion, wants to free Ny'alotha. And I think that we as the breaker of chains, or potentially even Sylvanas as the breaker of chains, because there is an old god whisper that says, when the arrow finds its mark, the final fetter falls away. And fetter is like a chain, and the arrow finding its mark, Sylvanas is Ranger General, and we have seen her use her bow quite a lot. I think it's a very fitting kind of little hint there. I think Sylvanas does plan, and I think that the way that Ny'alotha has been utilized, I think illustrates this. Sylvanas plans to release N'Zoth, I think is what's happening. There is also one other thing to consider, and that is that Sylvanas is not doing this per her own will. It is possible that it is being dominated. There's one reason why I say this, and that is not only because of the clear similarities and goals of Sylvanas and N'Zoth, and what we're seeing Sylvanas, potentially doing for N'Zoth. It's that when you finish the Dark Shore scenario, you get this, at least on the Horde side, I don't know if you get on the Alliance side, you get this toy called Brynja's Beacon, and it is a beacon for one of the Valkyr that Sylvanas has command over. And the flavor text on the item says, "Only the most powerful can dominate the wills of the Risen." One thing about the Forsaken is that their racial, one of them is called Will of the Forsaken. And it is told to us by Lillian Voss that all of the Forsaken are at least a little bit mad, like madness, like crazy. N'Zoth also has some quotes, for instance, where he says, "You think you know power." That is to kind of say that what you believe is power, you don't even understand. There is power far beyond your comprehension. You don't know power. That almost kind of seems to illustrate to me, however, that N'Zoth does know power. You see where I'm going with this? If N'Zoth has the power to dominate the wills of the Risen, Sylvanas might not be in control. And I believe I may have mentioned in my last video that I think that it would be very fitting if any entity or individual were to go inside of that prison blade, Ny'alotha, the Blade of the Black Empire. I think it would be very fitting that it's Queen Ashara. In Queen Ashara's death animation that you can see on the WoW model viewer on Wowhead, doesn't look like she actually dies. It looks like there's meant to be some kind of cinematic or follow-up to her defeat, which shows us something. Just want to point out there that as a side kind of tangent, that ny'alotha, this supposed, sunken city, is very much inspired by a city called R'lyeh, where from the Lovecraftian mythos, H.P. Lovecraft, who was kind of the main inspiration for beings like the old gods, Yog-Saron being very closely associated with Yog-Sothoth, the Lovecraftian side, Azathoth and Azeroth, you see what I'm getting at? In that mythos, there is something called the Key to R'lyeh, which is a dagger, and it's essentially something that I think is being mimicked in WoW a little bit, and I think that's being mimicked by Ny'alotha. And this can actually bring about the rising of R'lyeh, where Cthulhu waits dead and dreaming, and when he rises, the whole world kind of descends into chaos, and essentially the apocalypse happens. But I digress. That's more of a side point. I think that, as I've pointed out in several videos, and man, if Asmongold, if you watch this video, you have to watch my Deathwing N'Zoth Sargeras video, because it's very important for this. I think that, as I've mentioned before, there's some pretty huge correlations between Sargeras, Deathwing, N'Zoth, and I think it's very simplified when you can say things like the fact that Deathwing was essentially recruited by N'Zoth to make the Dragon Soul, which was then going to be used in a ritual that would summon Sargeras into Azeroth, and it would seem that N'Zoth wanted this to happen. I think that there is a pretty clear allegiance between N'Zoth and Sargeras, and it's even further illustrated by the demonic forces of the Burning Legion working with the forces of the Nightmare in Val-Shara. And once again, people will say that this is an enemy of my enemy is my friend type of situation, but I certainly would disagree. If what we're told in Chronicle is true, and Sargeras is so terrified of the old gods, or the Void Lords specifically, because it never really says that he's directly horrified by the old gods themselves, but more so the premise of what they sought to achieve on behalf of the Void Lords, I think that it would be completely asinine to think that in any capacity that Sargeras would work with the forces of the Nightmare or the old gods. And let's not forget that the leader of the Nightmare kind of incursion is Xavius, who was literally gifted his ebony eyes in his satyr form by Sargeras, the Lord of the Burning Legion. I think that they've kind of set this up so that Sargeras and his forces, and satyrs are demons, by the way, can basically make plays in the background and work along the nightmare very subtly. It's not even that subtle, to be honest with you, in order to achieve their goals. I think that there's a very clear connection between N'Zoth and fire, and once again, I think Deathwing is a great illustration of this. But I want to throw something out there. I think that N'Zoth is very much associated with death and shadow, and I think that the representation which we see in the cinematic with the confrontation or discussion, or really lack thereof, between Ashara and N'Zoth, the whole Tidestone cinematic, I think is kind of representative of this as well. N'Zoth is being personified and represented by shadow, and I think that shadow is something that should be associated with death, and I don't think that void and shadow are the same thing. But that's a different video. I'll have a link to that one in the description if you guys want to see that. I certainly do not agree that shadow and void are the same thing. But anyway, the point is that you have N'Zoth, the shadow, working with Deathwing, the flame. And Deathwing is essentially doing the bidding of N'Zoth, carrying out the will of death. I mean, his fucking name is Deathwing, for crying out loud. I think that there's a very strong parallel with those two characters, and also Argus and Sargeras. Argus being the shadow, death, the reaper, and Sargeras going on a crusade of what? Of death. Sargeras goes on this crusade where he's massacring life, right? He's the flame carrying out the will of the shadow. And I think that it's important to recognize that flame and shadow are indeed tangentially linked in almost all mythos ever. I mean, even if you think about games that are in the same sort of genre, like Dark Souls, for instance, is another huge one where the shadow and the flame, and even the shadow flame itself, are inherently linked together. I'm not going to get too much into that, but the point is that I think there's some parallels that are kind of being drawn here. Here's the deal. Think about N'Zoth and Queen Ashara. In the interview between Taliesin and Evitel and Muffinus, or Jeremy Feasel reacts to the picture of Queen Ashara and describes her in one word that he thinks of as fire. I think that this was a very clever thing that Jeremy did, and I don't necessarily think that he was being entirely truthful. Because when you think about Queen Ashara, and you think about Sylvanas, which one of them seems to be, at least recently, more associated with fire and burning shit down? I mean, Queen Ashara would seem to me that she is more closely associated with water, which, as a side note, is often associated with blood, which is directly connected with life. Life, blood, we've heard that saying many a times. And there are those who would say that all life originated from the ocean itself, from the domain that is the depths of the ocean. And essentially what I'm getting at here is I think that Sylvanas makes a better fit for the fire working with the shadow than Ashara working with the shadow. And I think that at this point, it would seem to me that that Sylvanas may intentionally try to defeat Ashara. This may have all essentially been a ruse to start this war, to get heroes back into it like Thrall and Jaina and Saurfang and Bane, and have them be brought together, as I've said in my other videos, in order to defeat this great evil that is coming. So then people would say, well, Pyro, doesn't that, with what you're saying, doesn't that mean that Sylvanas is evil because she's working with N'Zoth? No. Again, this goes so much deeper than what I can probably even explain in this video. But I don't think that the old gods are inherently evil, and I think that what Chronicles says about them is a little bit untrue. And I think that their quotes, and specifically very powerful meaning quotes like the pain of flesh is fleeting, true torment lasts forever. I think that's very indicative of a mindset of the old gods, and that is to say that flesh and the curse of mortality, or gift of mortality, as I see it, is an easy release. That's a very short, relatively painless existence, but being bound against your will and existing forever in a entropic manner is true torture. And I do think that the old gods are living creatures, and I do think that we as mortals are meant to slay them. And it even says in Chronicle that N'Zoth, this is in Chronicle Volume 3, N'Zoth knew that the mortals would seek it out and try to defeat it as they had done with Cthulhu, Yogg-Saron, etc. And N'Zoth was not afraid of this. And in fact, it would seem to me that N'alotha is almost beckoning this and preparing for this, because I think that the Blades of Mortals allow us to do incredible things. I think that we as mortals, being gifted our flesh, are very powerful, because it's funny, you know, we're considered a cursed existence by the Titans, as the definitely not microcosm Mechagon is illustrating right now. The Titans did not have flesh in their plan. And flesh, something that allows for change, but also death, you know, I think is something that they did not want to happen. Allow me to reiterate briefly that I believe that the Titans want an existence of immortals and eternals, where things never die. And I've said this many times, that that is sick and that's wrong. And I don't think that that's how it is meant to work. And I think that the premise of this is that if they are allowed to continue, and I believe that they are responsible for this, spreading the holy light and thus spreading things like the void, I think that eventually everything in the universe will be damned to languish in eternal torment in an entropic state within the void, and nothing will ever die. That is why I think the Titans are so fucking freaky. And I have plenty of videos that I would really urge you to go watch that illustrate this. And I think that it makes perfect sense as to why Sargeras would go on the crusade of burning things and killing them in order to try to thwart the Void Lord's plans. As I've said, I think the Titans essentially are the ones that are responsible for the void. Thus, the Titans are the Void Lords. Sargeras was not afraid of these void entities and void spirits, which we see in the game and we fight, like Dementius. He's not scared of that shit. Sargeras could easily decimate that kind of shit. He's scared of the ones who are causing the spread of that, and I'm telling you, that is the Titans. But again, it all ties back into this life versus death thing, and N'alotha being associated with death, Deathwing, Sargeras' crusade of death essentially, and Argus all kind of tying together in this seemingly perfect manner, I think is illustrative of this idea that Blizzard has done something very unique in their game. Because what I believe is that Blizzard has taken a force of the cosmos that is almost never the enemy, and they've made it the enemy. See, what I believe is that Aenar the Lifebinder, the only female Titan on the Pantheon, is essentially a usurper goddess. And what that means is that she has reign over a certain domain, and she is supposed to exist within a certain realm of reality. But I think that she is not supposed to have such power as she does now. I think that her interactions with us within the Argus the Unmaker fight, the way she speaks to us, the fact that she has not one but two dragon aspects, that she is the only Titan spirit who was not captured by the Legion and got to sit pretty upon Elunaria and be safe the whole time. I think that these are minor but very indicative points that are meant to illustrate that Aenar, for some reason, has been put in this higher position of importance. And Chronicle, once again, illustrates what this is. It says in Chronicle that after Sargeras decided that he was not going to go along with the Pantheon anymore, Aenar the Lifebinder reminded Sargeras that they had sworn to protect life whenever possible. Well, when you swear oaths, because that's what that is, among gods and figures of that nature, they are binding. And here's the thing, is that we can even use Helia as a good instance of this. Helia made a deal, struck a bargain, swore an oath essentially that if we succeeded in Helheim that she would let us go. And when she tried to stop us from leaving and try to break that oath, the Vrykul that's with us even makes mention of the fact that even in your own domain, you cannot break your oath. Even you must stay true to that, even in your own domain. So what I think happened was, if Aenar was telling the truth and that the Titans swore an oath to protect life, she is life. They must protect her. And so when they fail to do so, she is able to take things into her own hands and manipulate them in such a manner that is inevitably actually going to damn life. It turns into a very Thanos kind of love kind of relationship, and I know it's corny, but it says in Chronicle that Sargeras loved life. He was so proud of what the Titans were able to do, and watching these you know, civilizations flourish under the guidance of the Titans. He adored life, seemingly more than any of the other Titans. Makes me wonder if Sargeras adored and maybe even loved Aenar the Lifebinder. I mean, think about this. Sargeras is a literal flame burning with passion, you know, passion and love. And with what it says in Chronicle, I don't think that it's terribly far-fetched that the whole premise behind the Burning Crusade is just like Thanos, but not quite as twisted as Thanos' view. But think about it this way. In order to save life, Sargeras had to extinguish it, because if that was not allowed to happen, then it would inevitably be consumed by the void but still not die. So yeah, I look at ANR with a very selfish and personally driven motivation, where she doesn't really care about the well-being of everything else in the universe. It's all about life and her and, well, stopping Azeroth from waking up. But that's a different discussion. Let's get back to the Queen Ashara and Sylvanas thing. I think Queen Ashara has some frightening similarities to ANR, and I think that some of those things are pride, and I think that some of those things are vanity and overbearing self love, if you will, in this weird controlling mindset where the queen is actually commanding and kind of threatening the king. And I think ANR's doing this with Aman'Thul. I don't think Aman'Thul's in control of the Pantheon at all. And I think that Ashara is doing this with N'Zoth. I don't think N'Zoth has really been in control this whole time. And you know what? There are whispers from the Eye of the Corruptor, which is a rare that exists in Nazjatar. And the Corruptor is the title of N'Zoth from Hearthstone, by the way. The Eye can whisper to you, and one of the things that it says is that the queen threatens the king. Kill her. You must kill her. And I don't think that that is relating to Sylvanas and Anduin. I think that this is talking about Queen Ashara and N'Zoth. I mean, N'Zoth even says to Queen Ashara, "Arise, Ashara, arise, my queen." The Eye of the Corruptor, the Eye of N'Zoth, is literally whispering to us that the queen is threatening the king. It's Ashara threatening N'Zoth, and I think that this is once again pointing to this idea that the reason why Sylvanas baited us all out here with Nathanos, and the reason why their eyes glow with red fury, red and orange fury, the same as N'Zoth's, and the same as Gul'dan's, and the same as Deathwing, and the same as these characters, is because Sylvanas is in allegiance with N'Zoth, and I think that it is in order to bring about the end of everything. But I want to remind you that this is not inherently evil for a couple reasons. The first of which is, if things don't end, they will continue to stagnate until they become entropic. This is the very premise of how the void works. Entropy incarnate, something that should not be. And I also think that in WoW, as the devs have said, and as we know there is a realm of death that exists, death is not the end of the cycle. This game is built on a cyclical structure. And when you die, that is not the end. Your soul is going to go somewhere. And I think that could be Ny'alotha, or that could be the Shadowlands. And I think that this is very important for us to realize. I think the mortals have been blinded by this fear of death. And I think that it's a very kind of moralistically inclined message that Blizzard is trying to send, where they're basically saying, death is this inevitable thing. We've heard this said many times, you must kneel and bow because death is going to come for you. It's inevitable. And that's not untrue. But I think it's meant to try to get the human player like me and you to realize that death is this inevitability, but there's no reason to be afraid of it. If you're living in fear of death every day, then you might as well already be dead. You're not allowing yourself to really live to your fullest potential. And I think that it's a beautiful underlying message that Blizzard is going to reveal to us pretty soon. I just think that I feel as though that I've spotted it a little bit ahead of the curve. And I think that at this point, I don't even know for sure if N'Zoth's prison is actually down there. I know that that's what we've been led to believe, but I think that it's even possible that if N'Zoth isn't actually imprisoned down there, I think that it's a door. I think that what's down there is a giant gate. I think that that's possible. And all those chains that are symmetrically connecting to something down there aren't connecting to the body of an old god. I think it's possible that they're connecting to a doorway, a gateway that goes to the Shadowlands. That's what I think is very possible and very likely to happen, is that we're going to open a gateway into the realm of death, and we are going to go in there. And I think that that could very well be where N'alotha is. And if what I really believe is true, I think it's possible that N'alotha is more closely associated with Argus than we even realize. And with Argus being the Titan of Death, and the fact that Chronicle does not mention him at all, it cannot illustrate to us or explain where the origins of the Shadowlands came from, only that the Shadowlands came into existence when the first mortal being arose in the cosmos. Again, mortality being very directly associated with death. Flesh is his gift. He is your true creator. I think that the curse of flesh and mortality could potentially come from death himself. And I think that as mortals, just like old gods, I think we are inherently kind of destined to find this truth. And while Sargeras may be imprisoned at the seat of the Pantheon, I don't think Argus is. Because I've said many times, I think that Sargeras kind of put him into that blade when he stabbed it into the world. And again, you really got to watch my Deathwing Sargeras and N'alotha video, because I think it'll blow your fucking mind after you hear all this stuff. But this is what I think's happening. I think this is why Sylvanas says things like, in the end, they will serve death. They will serve me. This is why the Void is afraid of Sylvanas, because death and the Void do not like each other. I think that if anything, the Void, life, and light, the Holy Light, are kind of all on a team in some way. And I think the Alliance is, again, a sort of a microcosm of this. I think that the Alliance is, the Alliance having the Lightforged and the Void Elves, and this seemingly inherent will to try to protect living things, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think, again, that's illustrative of kind of a siding here. And I think that the Horde, you know, being on the side of being led by, you know, a being who is seemingly aligned with death, I think is very important. And let me tell you this, it's said in Chronicle that Cho'Gall once believed that the Horde was meant to bring about the Hour of Twilight, that was essentially the destiny of the Horde, and that the Hour of Twilight would be the apocalyptic end of all things. And you want to know something? With Sylvanas' quotes with Ny'alotha talking about how the blade will lead us to our destiny, I think that it is seemingly pretty evident to me that the Horde is indeed being steered toward its destiny of ending everything. And I know that this is hard to conceptualize and to understand for a lot of people, because they fear the end, they fear change, they fear death. But I think that it takes a certain person here in real life to accept that there is a truth in the inevitability of what is to come in our existence. And I don't think that you need to be afraid of that. And I understand that that's very hard to understand, because most people, you know, we don't want to die. Even though I don't see death the same way as other people, I don't want to die right now. But am I willing to accept that it is inevitability that will come? Yes. And I think that WoW is supposed to kind of help you to accept this. The beauty in WoW is that because it's a fantasy world, it's built on this cyclical construction that allows you to be confident in the fact that when you die, that it isn't the end. But let me tell you this, if the Titans are allowed to succeed and things become undying and languish in eternity forever, becoming mere robots or souls trapped in avatars, losing their mortality, that is what you should be afraid of. That is true torment. And that is the whole premise of the old gods and what they are trying to say to us. I could talk about this forever. I could go on and on, but I don't think that I need to. We will watch this unfold as it does. And as always, I must consider the possibility that I am entirely wrong, and perhaps even myself a little bit too prideful in the ideas. But, you know, I was watching Asmongold react to some of my things that I said in my last video, and Asmongold says, you know, I think he gives Blizzard too much credit. Man, you know, I appreciate that, because I think that says something about my ideas, and I value that. But at the same time, I'm just going off of what I see. What exists in front of us is the only evidence that I'm using for the theories. That's it. There's no fan fiction being written here. It's all in the books. It's all in the short stories and novels and in the game. And at the end of the day, maybe I am giving Blizzard too much credit, but I don't think so. I really don't think so. I'm putting faith in their ability to write this story, and the way in which I'm seeing it, which I'm witnessing it unfolding right now, is to me evidence of my belief. And at the end of the day, it's just for fun, you know? I mean, what else would I be doing right now today without this and without you guys? Where would I be, you know? All these things that I have and all of this, like this, you know, these, like, WoW has essentially become a very important part of my life. And I want you guys to understand something. I have learned so much. This sounds weird, but like, I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned a lot about the world and universe around me because of the way that WoW has made me kind of look at things. And I think that I'm a more grounded and happy and at peace person because of the speculation and what I do. And I just want to finish the video by saying thank you to those of you that are along for that ride. Like, the fact that I can sit down and just talk to a camera like this for 30 minutes and just spew and spout my ideas to you guys, and the amount of love that is shown back to me, just like, it's still something that just like racks my brain every time that I see it. And then for people who I don't always necessarily agree with, like McConnell and Asmongold, to show my videos to people and to give, you know, some credit to some of the things that I'm saying, like, you know, that's very special to me. And thank you so much for that. So yeah, I don't know. Thank you guys for letting me do this, and thank you guys for just listening, because at the end of the day, I could be wrong, I could be right, but really what matters is like, is just illustrating to you what I saw and trying to show you what I believe the truth of the matter is. And it means a lot to me that you're willing to listen to that. So anyways, that's it for this video. I think that Sylvanas is doing this for Ny'alotha to fulfill the Horde's destiny, and I think that it benefits Sargeras and the Burning Legion, and I think the world will burn with the beauty that is to come. And I think that it will soon be revealed to us that the Titans really were the true enemy, and we are in a lot of trouble. But that's pretty much it. I hope that this video wasn't too much incoherent rambling. I appreciate you guys very much. If you enjoyed this video, please put a like on the video. I would certainly appreciate that. It's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed it, and it's the best way to support me here on YouTube, since, you know, the ad rev is basically non-existent at this point. If you guys don't know, I do have a Twitter. It's twitter.com/pyromancersarg, S-A-R-G, and I'd appreciate if you guys go follow me there. I can be kind of a smartass on Twitter, so just be prepared for that. But I do tweet about a lot of lore-related things, and I would love to share that with you guys there as well. I also do have a Twitch. It's twitch.tv/pyromancer. And when I stream World of Warcraft, which is mostly what I stream, I do talk about the lore. I do analyze things live in the game. And I'd like to be able to share that with you guys as well. Last thing is I have a Patreon. There's a link to that in the description down below. Don't think that needs much explaining, so that's it. I appreciate you guys very much. Thank you once again. Stay awesome, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace!